Welcome back to our show From Fear to Fearless. This show is all about sharing stories of ordinary people who have done and continue to do extraordinary things despite their fear. Fear is a normal part of growth and change, but for many of us, especially for children, fear becomes a factor and we have hard time pushing past our fear. Our mission of this show is to share stories of others who have pushed past their fear and have done some amazing things. So our show has a slightly different format. So Kathy, you well know as well. So we start off with talking about your fear and sharing your story to inspire others to share with their kids. And after the 20 minutes, we end the show so that people who are in rush can go. And then after that, what we do is we continue our conversation where you can offer tips and anything that you want to share with parents so they can help their kids. So that's our
Perfect.
structure for the show. And it usually runs about 50 minutes or so, the rest of them. So that's what our show looks like. So today we have our guest who is Cathy Dirksen. Cathy is the founder of her company Inspired Tenacity. She is dedicated to improving the lives of women in her community and around the world. Cathy is an international speaker and 10 times number one best-selling author with stories that inspire the readers to take a leap of faith into reaching for their big goals. And you just shared with me that you've launched 3 books already this year. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Amazing. Thank you. Um, she has created a platform for supporting women to share their own inspiring stories in a collaborative books. In her program, Kathy takes you from chapter concept to published best-selling author in a simple, exciting process. So if you want to become the next best-selling author, you have the lady in front of you. So welcome, Kathy.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And I just learned that you don't live that far from me. I thought you were
No,
somewhere else in the globe.
we could just pop over and meet for coffee.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. So you had some fear growing up. You want to
Yes,
share
yes.
one of your fear you had?
Yeah, it's always interesting and going back with that question, looking into my childhood and where were those fears. But the one that I felt was the one I needed to talk about today was this that I'm dyslexic.
Hmm.
And so reading, spelling, especially reading out loud off of while I'm reading has always been something that creates a fear in my life, especially as a child, because of course, back in those days when I was a kid in school, there weren't the supports that there are now. There isn't wasn't the even really putting a name on it or giving it the understanding that there just needed to be some adaptations made. It was just oh, you're not a good reader, you're not a good speller, or luckily I never got to the point where I felt people thought that I was not smart. So that was luckily never a challenge for me, but just knowing that I did not read and spell the way other people did and I was expected to definitely created that kind of fear around asking questions or even just bringing out the idea that I needed some other help or a different way of doing things. So,
How did you hide it, or was it obvious to others, or how did you manage that in a classroom setting?
mhm. Well, looking back on it now, I see that what I did, because I didn't ask for help, I didn't point out any further that there was a difference that needed anything. And so, looking back on it now, I see that what I did was found my own ways of working around it.
Mm.
So, when it came to different reading programs we had to do, when I think back to them, I remember now that I was looking for different strategies. So rather than reading the whole thing, I would look for what I thought were the key points I was supposed to be getting out of it.
Mm.
And, really in retrospect, I guess it was a good skill to learn. And even right through university, I never once finished any of the novels that we were supposed to do. Or, I would either find those Cole's notes is what it was back in those days that gave you the overview and a few quotes and that kind of thing. I mean, now I live by audiobooks are my favorite way of absorbing new books.
Mm.
And yeah, so it's amazing, how we do just learn. We learn to adapt, and we learn to, in those days, yeah, I would say that I wasn't facing the fear, I was working around it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I was one of those students too, where English was second language for me. So fear sets in. What if I say the words wrong or if I don't pronounce it right? So to combat that, I also used a lot of Coles notes. The reading the book, I looked for, like yourself, I looked for the main idea. I went from the question, I would read the question and then go back into the book searching
Yes,
to
yes.
find the answer instead of reading, because I didn't know if I could read all of it and understand it like other people were doing it, right? So we develop our own adaptation, right?
Exactly,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So how did you overcome your anxiety? When did that happen?
I think it was just from doing it over and over again and recognizing that I was able to succeed despite it,
Hmm.
that helped to get past that. And I mean, again, I'm so grateful for spell check,
Yes.
because there's no way I would be even doing any of the emails or the books or any of the work that I'm doing now. I would not be doing, I'm sure, if there was not spell check to make sure that I was actually spelling things properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really, with my dyslexia, I really don't trust my spelling. And I would find that I would be choosing words that I knew that I was comfortable and confident around spelling, rather than choosing words that were a better description or a better fit for the sentence. So
Mm-hmm.
I know that that has been something that I've done through the past to get through that. And so I think that's what it's been, kind of learning through fear, working my way around it, looking for other strategies. But I would say, though, a lot of it was hiding the problem and not asking for that help, and not looking for other people's support in dealing with it. It was just learning to figure it out or find a way to deal with it myself, which
Mm-hmm.
I definitely don't encourage. And especially, now that there are so many more opportunities and resources available for children when they are learning these things, or and even just noticing when someone is learning differently, because that's really what it is. It's a different learning processing ability. So many people that are dyslexic or have other neurodivergent situations, quite often it's kind of assumed that that's a reduction in ability to learn, but really it's not. And now that I know more about it and understand it more, I've really come to know that many of us are creatively in a much better situation. So I see myself that I think bigger.
Yeah.
So whereas I guess normal people have a certain way of approaching things and looking at the situations that they're in. But I find for myself that I tend to look at things from a higher level, from a bigger, more creative, incorporating everything all at once and kind of working with it all at once, which I guess can kind of create a bit of a spider web of activity, but also just creates a whole different way of looking at it. And if we look at, who are those people in history that were neurodivergent and dyslexic, so many of the main explorers, inventors were dyslexic,
Yes.
whether it's Graham Bell, Einstein, Churchill,
Mm-hmm.
even Tom Cruise,
Mm-hmm.
Richard Branson. Like, so many of these people that created like out of the box ideas are people that are neurodivergent.
Yeah, because you're forced, right? You're forced to think in a
And
higher
it's just
level.
the way our brains work
Yeah.
too, is
I mean,
that we just, our brains approach information differently.
yes.
And
Yes.
so because I can't spell, it doesn't slow me down.
Yeah. How do I overcome that, right? And I don't know how much you know about what I do, but I work with students of all abilities, right? Any differently wired, I say about them. So when I was working in the school system, is when I discovered my methodology is that whatever I was doing with kids labeled as who had autism or Down syndrome or dyslexia or whatever condition they were labeled under, whatever I worked, however I worked with them, I just took it and applied to what we call our normal students, and it started working really well with them.
Oh, good.
So that was my discovery part, where that we don't need to treat anyone differently. Just you have to find the what works for each of the child, according
Hmm.
to their needs and how they function and how they process. The brain processing is what we need to look at.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And like many of these things, there's a genetic component to
Yes.
them. And as it happens, both of my children are also dyslexic,
Okay.
and they've come through the school system and received, different levels of understanding and treatment. I found that my daughter was acknowledged quite quickly that she had challenges, whereas with my son, they automatically put it into more of an ADD behavior
Mhm.
problem and not looking at it differently, like, well, maybe there's something else here. So it actually took right till grade 7 before they would acknowledge and do the testing to say, oh, yes, you're right, he is dyslexic.
Mm, mm. And sometimes that's a miss label, right? And then now he's not getting the proper guidance he would need for what he's going through.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
And there's one point in grade 3, he wanted to quit school
yeah,
because his teacher just kept telling him that you're just not trying hard enough or
yeah,
you're purposely not doing well. I can tell you're smart, so why aren't you doing this properly?
yeah,
And she just had no understanding at all that there was a reason why
yeah,
his spelling wasn't good and his reading wasn't great, and but she just jumped to the assumption that it was his attitude.
yeah, 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 absolutely. So you say adaptation. Your title was that, how you adapted to get to where you are now. Now you have gone to help others write and publish their work. So tell us about that.
Yes, and if you had asked me years ago if I saw myself having a career in publishing and writing, I would have laughed at you because it definitely was never something that was on my list of to-dos. And it just has been kind of the path that I followed, and
Mhm.
listening to kind of my intuition on where was it that people were asking for me to be of service and to support them. And it's led me into this situation now where that's pretty much the main part of my work is creating collaborative book projects for people to share their stories.
Mm.
And that's one of the nice things with these books is that you only have to write one chapter.
Yes,
So for most people it's very doable,
yes.
and it's something you could get finished over the weekend or with a few blocks of time, just get it done. And I find that most people find it really exciting to be part of a book, especially when you're actually holding your book in your hand, that, hey, this is my book. So I've really been enjoying that. And a big part of my focus is helping especially midlife women who've kind of lost track of their life and who they are and what they want and what they're going to do next, and to really help them clarify that. And I find our stories are a great way to do that, that it helps the author to clarify their own situation, but it also then helps the reader to have a role model and to see other examples of what they're also living through. So it's been fun and I really enjoy doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for a parent, let me just go back a little bit to
Mhm.
your childhood. How did your parents help you? And is there something that you wish your parent had done when you were going through learning?
Well, again, there really was no acknowledgement of it at all as a kid. And it, whether it was my personality and I was just one that would naturally just go look for my own solutions rather than asking for help,
Mm,
but there really was no acknowledgement and no support offered. It was just kind of what I mumbled through till I got to figuring out what to do next or how to handle it myself.
yes.
But
And how did you help your kids? Because you said you had two
I
kids.
was definitely very, not pushy, but knowing that they needed to at least be acknowledged that there was a difference there,
Yes.
and not letting go of it. As I mentioned with my son,
Mm-hmm.
it was right back to, I think it's probably grade 2 or 3 when I started telling them, this is what we need to be looking for. I think he's being challenged with this. And so I kept going with it every year, over and over again, with the principals, with the teachers. And by the time we finally got that support and that, just that written acknowledgement. And it's definitely so important to get that done, in that they do get that help that they need in elementary school and high school, but it also really feeds over into when they go into post-secondary school, because there's a lot of resources available for
Mm-hmm.
kids that have been labeled or that have a known disability, so they call it. But with the financial assistance and even the assistance, my kids have both received the different software that helps you read books.
Yes.
So it will read to you instead of you having to read the book. So that's been really valuable for them. And even from a financial point of view with the post-secondary, it's the programs that are available have helped a lot in covering their tuition, even paying back their student loans later. So from many points of view, it's definitely worth it for parents to really don't give up until you've got the right resources in place.
Absolutely. And it's hard because parents struggle between going, do I want to label my
Yes.
child as something, right? But it's not label. I always, working in the classroom, I know that that's how you get the service that are out there for them. Otherwise, nobody looks at your child because they're just a troublemaker at one point,
Exactly, exactly.
right?
And I would say most of those kids that are troublemakers in class, there's a reason that we need to find.
What is it that is stirring that, right? Because either they're bored, sometimes it comes out of boredom too, and that means they're at a level that they're not getting that stimulation, or their curiosity is being let down, and now they got to do something to figure out what am I going to do next, right?
That's right.
So yeah, so parents, I think, have hard time, but as you say, I noticed with even my stepson, he has a ADHD. When he went into university, he can ask for extra time to write his test. Even that
Mhm.
little extra thing helps
Or
him.
to be able to write their tests in a different
No.
location, so it's a quiet area, not in the big classroom with 100 other kids. And
And starting early, like you did with your son and daughter, it helps them to really live with that. And they learn to, as you say, adapt along the way as they grow older, rather than like, they pushing it away that I have this, they learn to live with it, right?
yes,
Mhm.
exactly. And look for those benefits that come from it. Like
Mhm.
with my son, he's very artistic and creative. It's amazing. And like I was saying, I think that's part of that whole difference in how our brains process information, is that it becomes that very creative side as well.
So when he went from being labeled he has ADHD and he's lazy, to when they actually gave looked into it and he was had dyslexia, did it change for him? Did he change?
Oh, definitely. And I think part of it was that how he felt about being a student changed.
Mm,
So before, because he was, holding that identity of being the problem,
mm,
right? Like the teachers kept telling him that you're just misbehaving and that you're just not focusing and you're not, that you have to fix this problem. And so once we were able to, clarify that and actually get him some support, then the teachers treated him differently. And they didn't treat him like he was the problem. They treated him as, someone that just needed different support.
yes, yes, absolutely. So what would you tell your younger self about fear, now looking back?
Definitely not to be afraid to reach out for help, and to really make sure the people around you know what you're going through, and and even if they can't always help right away, then often there's something that they can either support you in your own coping with it, or down the road, work on that process of finding solutions, finding other ways, finding resources. So that's definitely the big part, is don't be afraid to find someone. And even if it's just one or two people that you feel comfortable with, like a teacher or a parent, or, just somebody that can possibly help you work through things and move forward.
Absolutely, reach out for help. It is hard to do, especially when you're young and you think of yourself as you're the one who's has this problem, no one else. Did you have that? I always
Well,
thought
exactly. Yeah. Because no one's talking about it and nobody else is revealing their situation.
yeah, so I always felt like I'm the one who can't read, or I'm the one who's going to spell something wrong, so you better be quiet, right? Protection mechanism, as you said. We
Yes,
go around
definitely.
protecting ourselves. Thank you so much, Cathy, for being here and sharing. And thank you for tuning in to our show. And we go live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. PST. If you're interested in making learning easy for your child, please book a call at Learning Success Academy with our one of our certified learning success coaches. Until next time, see what's on the other side of fear, and let's ignite and inspire children to push past their fear and make fear not a factor for them. Thank you, and I'll see you next time on Wednesday at 11 a.m. PST. I'm going to continue with those of you who are staying with Cathy in our wisdom circle, asking her for more strategies and talking about how her situation with your kids. I like to learn more about that because it is a show for parents, right? And when you hear from the teacher or someone tells your child is different, it's not something easy to accept.
No, there was definitely a lot of frustrations. And I still remember at one point in my daughter's classes, I think it was grade 3, and they had to do those little quizzes where it's timed, like the math
Yeah,
quizzes. They had a
drills.
certain number of questions they had to answer in a certain set of time. And so they had to finish that, the 1 times table or the 2 times tables and the 3 times tables, but they couldn't move to the next one until they had finished that first one
Mm,
in the time. And I remember she was getting all the answers right, so she knew the information, but couldn't go fast enough to get it finished in the time. And the teacher would not let her go forward
yeah.
because I didn't understand that it's a timing thing, a processing speed thing, not a lack of understanding. So that was definitely one of the examples of when I really had to inform the teacher.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it is in our system, as teachers, not all teachers are educated on all these conditions or different in learning, right? Difference in the learning of each child.
Yes.
We're taught as if it's one system fits all or one model fits all. And if the child, it's getting better and better. I would say they are differentiating it now much better than it used to be, but still, it's still a problem.
Yes. And I would say too that even when people think they understand something, if they're not living with it,
Yeah.
they can never really completely understand it.
Yes. Yes.
And so quite often I would find the teachers would try to understand or think they were doing the right thing, but clearly weren't quite exactly understanding the situation.
Yeah. Unless you live with it, you can't tell.
Well,
And
exactly.
yeah, I was in a like last year of university, and I was sitting in a lecture hall, and I'm like, I sat a little further from the board in front of me, the whiteboard, and I'm sitting there going, and I'm going, why he's writing so it doesn't look like sharp writing on the board, right? Because I'm thinking he's doing something wrong. Like it's like he should get a new marker. All of these things. Guess what it was at the end of the day? It was my eyesight was not working. I didn't have distance look. I couldn't look at the distance. Then I moved closer and it got better. And I also got a glass. I also went and got glasses and it got better. So sometimes, unless you're experiencing, the eyesight is similar, right? What you see and what
Yes.
I see might not be the same.
That's a very good way to compare it, yes.
So when a child is going through these different ways of learning and they're adapting, like yourself, we can't tell what adaptation you have done so far.
No, exactly. And even the strategies that you come up with sometimes might create a different challenge
Yeah.
that other people weren't expecting. Just
Yes.
the way that you are handling something, and then coming down to, well, is it okay that you're doing like we were talking about using the Coles notes
Yeah.
to get through reading projects. Like, is it important that you read every single word of a book? Or is it important that you understood the message and the context and the, so whereas some teachers would have said, oh, it's not okay that you didn't finish the whole book.
Yes.
And others would be more of understanding of, okay, well, you've got the message and you can answer the questions. And so I think that's part of it too, kind of being able to open up what's okay and what are options that we see as being appropriate.
Yes. And it comes down to now that we have Chat GTP come into the world, and the kids who don't want to read, who wants a summary of a book, they can just say to Chat GTP, give me a summary, write me an essay, write me a passage or whatever, right? They can get it. But how do we police them, right?
That is bringing in a whole new.
Yeah.
And
It
you're
gives
right,
the
because in
cold
those
notes.
cases, they don't really even have to have looked at anything.
Thing.
They just get it to write.
Yeah, at least we had to read the cold notes.
That's right. And we were creating our answers. So when we were writing our essay or exam questions, they were coming from us
Yes.
based on our understanding, not just the computer writing the whole thing. So,
Yes.
yeah, no, it's definitely going to create a whole. It's hard to imagine what the learning education system, how we're going to have to adapt to the availability of that kind of thing. I mean, before with the plagiarism and things that, kids would be able to purchase an already completed essay on a certain subject that they sometimes would just turn in as their own, and that had become an issue. But yes, you're right. Now with this whole new AI system,
It's
it's
different. Yeah.
in some ways
Education
it'll
system.
help learning because it does make so much more available to us.
Yeah.
But then, yes,
How do we make it a tool, right? Instead of policing, like my as an educator, my view is always like, well, when the calculator, right? You can use the calculator as a crutch, or you can use it as a powerful tool when learning math, right? So it comes down to that now for English teachers.
that's
But
true. That's a
yeah,
good comparison. Yeah,
most of them needs to most of the assignments, I think teachers have turned it into in class writing, so they can't have access to Chat GTP. You got to write it by
right.
yourself and your brain. That's all you get. But I think Chat GTP could be used as a tool, and I think more and more students could, as the cold notes did for you and I, it actually gave me insight into how I can actually the novel was, right. You know what? I wouldn't have thought of it myself. It
That's
gave me
true.
clues. And I thought of it like that. And I thought of it like that. Though it gave me perspectives. So it can turn into a tool, I think, over
Yeah,
time. We
you're
don't
right.
use it. In class essays for sure, just so people can show their talent in writing, right? Their skills in writing. But other than that, it has to be a tool. We can't police it as teachers.
No, it is definitely a whole. It's hard to imagine what the next few years will look like with it kind of being incorporated more in so many different ways.
Yeah. Another model, I think of it as if the child could take whatever Chat GTP is giving and do presentation, like own it, own the information back,
Right.
make it their own and own it and present it, give it a new meaning to it, take it at another level to it, right? Those
Yes.
are more creative ways of using it too. So we got
Yeah,
to
that's
see.
when you know that you actually understand something. If you can teach it, so
Yes,
present it in a way that others are learning, then that's when you know that you've learned it.
truly learned it. Yeah,
Before that, you're just kind of regurgitating the information that came at you and putting it right back down.
absolutely, absolutely. And what do you think as a mom with two kids who had dyslexia, what did you think that helped them the most?
Hmm. I would say probably what's helped them the most is that combination of being acknowledged that this isn't a problem, it's just a difference.
Hmm.
And then having those resources, like we were talking about, being allowed to have extra time on things, being allowed to have a different environment where they're working on their projects, and having somebody that they could go to with questions and to feel supported, that they didn't have to necessarily go to the teacher in the classroom when that
Mhm.
might make them feel like they're, again, standing out in the group is not part of the whole group, but to have their resource teacher who was their other
Mhm.
teaching person that they could ask questions of, that they knew understood and knew what their challenges would be, and
Yeah.
working around that. And one of the school systems that my son went to, it was a different program where they were allowed to do the whole thing in their own time.
Okay,
And because
self-paced.
that was one of the things with him, that certain things he would do a lot faster.
Mm.
So he would get through things really fast, but then he'd get bored because he was already, he was like, he had to stop and wait for everybody else to catch up.
Mm.
Whereas with this other system, he could do those parts as fast as he wanted to, and the parts that he needed more time on, then he had time to do in his own time as well. So I found that that system really worked well for him, because he
Mm.
felt he was in control of his learning and how he approached things. And I think it really helped his confidence as a student, as a learner,
That's,
to know that he could just figure out what worked best for him.
yeah. There's a kid who went from lazy to owning his own schedule,
Oh,
right?
exactly, exactly. And he got through things so fast. He actually ended up finishing high school a semester early
Wow.
because he just did things in his own time and through it. So,
That's why this one size fits all model of education sometimes is not working for many students because they're just forced to sit where
yes,
they
yes,
can't move forward. Like your son, if you hadn't found that way for him and got into the school where he was self-paced, it would have been a different future for him, right?
yes. Oh, exactly, exactly.
So
And
go ahead.
I was just kind of going back into the kind of the longer term repercussions of dealing with fear and not facing fear as a child, and how it's can really continue on through into adulthood. And one of the groups that I work lot with is, again, midlife women, but have come to they've been dealing with a fear of trying new things, or a fear of, being in new environments, or dealing with new groups of people. And for the ones that have allowed those fears to hold on right through their life, it can really interfere with moving through those different stages of life
Mhm.
if those fears are still holding you back.
Yes.
So, just really another really thing for parents to think about is how critical it is to teach kids those skills when they're young, and to make sure they understand that, we all face fear, and that's, fear is never going to completely go away. We just learn to deal with it. We learn strategies around it. We learn to, find other people that can support us through it. But learning that it's something that we need to work through
Mhm.
is such a critical part of moving through life.
Yes. Has any of your children ever felt like we have now a label? Sometimes it goes the other way around, right? Sometimes I meet students who say to me, I have learning disability, and they wear their
Yes.
as a badge, and I can't do this because I have learning disability. And
Yes.
I'm like, no, I just see you as a person. Let's start getting to know you, right? That's kind of how I break through them. Has that come across in your children? Like, did they feel like they have a label now? And
I think there was always some of that. So it would be hard not to have it at least kind of
yeah.
in the back of your mind. I think the fact that I'm also dyslexic, my sister is, my nieces are, that, it's a family tradition. So I think that helps for them to see other people in their life that are learning strategies and coping with it, and living good, productive, creative,
Yeah.
outgoing lives, despite that, or in some ways because of that. So I think that was really a helpful part in my family.
Yeah. So they see it that everybody was in it. So they felt like this is part of our growth. Can you give us three strategies that the parent can take if they have a child right now? or tips or something that you know that it worked really well for you, well for your nieces and your kids, right? Because there's a lot of parents who get diagnosed in the beginning with their kids and they don't know what to do.
Hmm. Oh, definitely. So definitely that first part is, I think part of it is that parents need to trust themselves. So
Mm.
if they feel that there's something going on, something that's different, they need to pursue that. And I've heard so many stories of where parents have thought there was something going on, because of course they're the ones that see that child right from the beginning, and on that day-to-day difference and comparing them with other kids. And but sometimes the school system doesn't acknowledge it, or the doctors might not see it the same way. Again, they're only seeing little snips of time, whereas the parent
Yes.
sees them a lot. So I think that's the first thing, that if you feel that there is something that needs to be looked into, don't stop asking and looking for resources until you at least get someone that will acknowledge it and look into it with you.
Mm.
And after that, definitely important to make sure that you understand the options and resources that are available. Because, again, going back through the different, like finding the support in high school, finding support in post-secondary school, sometimes it can be overwhelming and confusing, even for those of us that are finished all that and going back into it. And so just to, make sure that you understand what's available for your kids, so that you can support them in finding those resources as well and making use of them. That's the other part, that the resources might be available,
Yeah.
but they might not be using them. So
Yeah,
really stepping
implementing it.
into that.
Getting them and implementing it for your child is another step.
Exactly, exactly. And I think too, connecting with other families that are in similar situations. Again, never looking at each other that we have to be the same, but just dealing with similar challenges, I think really helps us to kind of gain our own confidence in moving through our own challenges when we're not feeling alone. Like feeling alone in a challenge and a struggle, I think is one of the hardest things to deal with. And it makes the challenge even harder. Whereas having community and having others that whether it's just venting because you need to be able to just get things off your chest, or whether it's asking about resources. And there's been so many people that I've been able to help, especially around the post-secondary funding and what's available for that, that a lot of parents had never even heard of that. The
Yeah.
students, the school system never told them that, and just even how to get testing and when they need to get testing and that sort of thing. It's so definitely connecting with the community and other people that can really hear what you're saying.
Yeah. Where would a parent find what's available for their kids if they have dyslexia?
Oh, let's see, where there are some good websites. I don't remember them exactly right now, but if you go into, like, here in BC, and that's the problem too, right? Every different location is going to have different systems and different resources available. But here in BC, we do have some good government websites where they've brought together the resources that are available. And most of the post-secondary schools will have a contact person
Okay.
that, and again, I would always encourage people, both the parents and the children, to, like, don't be afraid to reach out to those people and
Mhm.
ask questions. I think many people are kind of intimidated by the idea of, phoning up someone that works at a university to ask their own questions. But I mean, that's what they're there for, right? They're there
Exactly.
to support you in your learning and to bring the resources to the people that need them. So
If you don't call, they won't have a job.
exactly, just keep asking questions and keep, letting people know what's working for you, what's not working for you. Maybe you need something slightly different. I know out at UBC they had a big, some of the training programs where the kids could go in and get their testing done at a reduced pricing if they needed to get it done privately.
Mm.
And that was kind of interesting to get involved with those projects as well. So definitely asking around and connecting with other parents that might have already found resources, and asking, even in the school, in your own, like, elementary school and high school, not all the teachers or principals are going to know the answers.
Mm.
So just keep asking, like, who might know this, who's got this experience, who's been through this.
Mhm.
That's, I think the big thing is keep asking questions, keep reaching out, keep don't stop until you feel like you've got what you need.
Mhm. And it sometimes it's not, it doesn't stop either, right? Because every stage of your child's life, they're going to change. You need to add more extra help or
Mhm.
change the way they're getting help. So it's a,
Mhm.
as a parent, it is an ongoing
Yes.
process. It's never until
Yeah.
they can take care of it.
And one of the things that just popped into my head too is the registered disability savings plan
Okay.
that we have in Canada. That even kids that have like a learning disability can possibly qualify for that.
Okay.
And it's definitely worth looking into.
Awesome. Thank you. So I want to ask you, you know, you have so many people with dyslexia in your family. I've
Mhm.
never met, like you said, your son, daughter, and the nieces and everyone, right? And sister. Does it affect same way? Like when you guys, like, do you ever talk about how does it affect your son versus yourself? Does is a similar situation or is it different? Is there a difference?
We're all slightly different.
Okay.
You know, we have similar things, but not exactly the same. And even between my two kids, they definitely have very different levels of being impacted and how it affects them. Um,
What
I
would you
know,
say some of the similarities are between?
like even with the level of like how the spelling is impacted, and part of it could be, how early in life they got those supports and resources, and definitely the huge part is the spelling and the reading speed. And that's a good point. I haven't really had a conversation with, like with I know my niece wasn't diagnosed till she was actually in college.
Okay.
So she went right through school with nobody understanding
Mhm.
what her challenges were. And so for her, I know she definitely found it harder to, actually, in a way, it might have benefited her because she ended up going into becoming a mechanic,
Mm.
because that hands-on physical,
Mhm.
like to actually, figure out the mechanics of something and how it all works together was what worked well for her. Whereas the more academic side,
Did it?
possibly was more challenging for her when she wasn't supported at all. So, but yeah, no, it would be interesting to sit down and see how we each have different things. And one of my funny points that I always like to that hits me sometimes is, sometimes you go into a restaurant and they've got the men's and women's washrooms.
Mhm.
And when they're really nice, they actually put a word on there so you can tell with men's, women's. Some places will just put an M and a W.
Mm.
Those are two letters that my brain switches all the time. Like
Mm.
even when I'm typing, I will switch M's and W's.
Mm.
So my brain just, that's the one thing that I notice the most. My brain flips things upside down and side to side. So
Mhm.
like M's and W's, I'm always switching. B's, P's, and D's,
Mm.
so I'm switching up and down and side to
Nice.
side in my brain. And so yeah, so when I'm in a place where the washrooms are only labeled with an M or a W, I actually have to stop and think about it. Like which one is the M, which one's the W? So
Mm.
that's one of my pet peeves of how dyslexia impacts my my
We
life
should,
out in the big world.
well, we should put it. That's why they always put the man and the woman and the M and the W. Then we get it.
Put a little image or something, but not just the M or the W.
Yes, it's like sometimes those simple things, right? That
Well, exactly. Yes.
yes, that's like even for wheelchair, right? We don't think of all the ramps that needs to be around when you're
Until you're the
walking.
one in the wheelchair that's,
Until you sit down, you're like, "Where's the ramp? I can't get around this place. Where's the sidewalk?"
yeah, exactly,
You
exactly.
notice everything when it starts. When you sit down on a wheelchair to
Mhm.
figure stuff out. So yeah, it is. So you must be good in seeing shapes then, because if you're rotating, I just went into my math mind.
I think I'm good at kind of that spatial fitting of things because
Yeah,
yes, it's always kind of a flowing, moving,
yeah.
and like one of my specialties is like packing when our kids were little and we were going camping, like packing the back of the minivan with
Mm,
all of that camping gear and luggage and all those things. I could
really
just like
good.
spatially just figure out where things all need to go to. That was my specialty.
Yeah,
How can I
packing.
pack this?
Yeah, but that's your superpower, right? Because I find with kids with autism too, right? I used to work with so many of them, and I had a student who would want to cut real flowers. She wanted me to cut the real flowers for her, and that was her little. She was fixated on that. She has got to buy these flowers. Her mom buys them, and I also go to their house to work with her too. So, and then we have to sit and cut them into another shape. And these are
Okay,
like petals. If you can't cut them too, so they're gonna
that's
fall
pretty
apart.
tricky.
But we're very delicate, so we cut. And every time I cut, it's not perfect for her because she sees angles to the point I cannot see with my eyes. She says, no good. Cut again, cut again. And we go through like five, six flowers and I still don't get it. And then she's like, give it to me, I'll cut it. And then she'll cut it. And then she's like, this is perfect now. Because she
No,
sees different.
yeah, you're right, and I think that's too one of the differences between the group of us and the family is that I don't notice little details like that. So to me, it's more of that bigger picture of
Mhm.
what's going on, whereas my daughter is very detailed, like very specific details
Mhm.
or similar like that. If there's something in her room that's been moved, like even a fraction of a centimeter, she knows. She
Mhm.
sees it. And she'll tell me to put it back the way it was. It's like,
Mhm.
I have no idea how it was. It looks fine to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So she's very detailed.
Yes.
And does her letters flip too? Is that one of her? Is that?
Not as much as I do. For her,
Mhm.
it's more of the spelling challenges and the speed, being able to like actually move through the reading process. And I think, and with my son, it's even more the spelling, like just the choosing the, and again, it comes down to like we were saying that unless you're living it, you can't really understand it.
Yeah.
And like the idea that even though you know something is spelled properly, your brain keeps telling you it's not and it doesn't look right.
Yes.
And even a word that you've used over and over and over again, like even sometimes my own phone number, I'll look at it and go, no, that looks wrong. That can't be right. And, so it's just things look differently and we see them differently and put the sequence together differently, but
I,
it changes.
yeah, I believe I'm not diagnosed with it, but I believe I have it because letters move on me. Like I have to be. That's why I get so tired reading. I don't know if you experience that because I gotta focus like so much into my reading,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
after reading two paragraphs, you have to take a rest.
Or you realize that you've been focusing so hard, you haven't really been thinking about the words. So you got to go back
And
and start
comprehend now.
again.
Yeah, you have to read to comprehend. Now I just finished reading. Let me go back and find the message again. So
Exactly.
I've
Yes.
never got diagnosed, but I know for sure, like listening to you and knowing about it, that all the letters sometimes they're moving, and that's for me. It's like this, looking at them so closely, so I can make them stay, so I can finish reading what I'm reading.
And
But
it seems like the strategies need to always be shifting as well.
yeah,
Like if I'm reading something that's like a big block of reading, sometimes I find it helps to actually keep my head moving. Just the fact that my
mm,
head is moving, for some reason, I'm able to focus on the words better.
yeah,
And then other times, I just need to sit really still.
yes, yes.
But
Thank you so much, Kathy, for sharing all your tips. And it's the first time I've ever met someone who had kids as well, and yourself having dyslexia. So I wanted to dive into that and give parents more opportunity to understand it. And as you said, your three things were, learn more about it, ask for help. Don't think you're alone. and find communities to belong to so you can share resources, you can share ideas and collaborate, right?
Exactly.
You
Yes.
you don't want to think you're alone. That was and which is what you did in the beginning as a young person, was you
Yes.
handled it yourself.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, and I think the fact too, actually, after watching my niece go through that, being diagnosed late, and then my son not being accepted until later, and it definitely helped when my daughter came. She was the next one to come along, so she got that extra attention because it's like, okay, it took too long with those ones. We've got to really focus down and get the help we need at the very beginning.
Yes. And being persistent with the help they need, right? Sometimes school systems can push it away or say it's
Yeah.
not this, it's that, it's more behavior, but then as a parent you have to have that intuition to keep pushing it, finding the right help. And if it wasn't for you, I think your son would not have the right help he needed.
No,
Sounds like.
no, no,
Yeah.
because I knew
Nice.
exactly what we were looking for.
Yes. Yes. So what does he do now?
Actually, now he works in social work, so he's helping
Um,
other kids that are, having challenges in life.
yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. And he's got so much to share. You can
And
say
he
it.
finished his degree. So,
Yeah.
despite his challenges, he again found the resources, figured out his own strategies, and he's finished his degree now.
Yes, yes. You just have to learn to adapt, like you said.
That's right.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. And thank you for staying with us for the Wisdom Circle. And thank you for tuning into the show. If you, we will go live again on Wednesday at 11 a.m. PST. If you're interested in making learning easy for your child, please book a call with our certified learning success coaches at learningsuccessacademy.com. I'll have Cathy's information in our show notes so you can reach to her. She helps women publish books, which is very exciting. You're giving women voice, right, to publish their words. Until next time, see what's on the other side of fear. Let's ignite and inspire children to push past their fear and make fear not a factor for them. Let's help our kids learn and grow fearless. Let's influence them and impact them to see unlimited possibilities. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.